Look at the state of your tyre when you're cornering without an insert. So this is highbrow, nerdy performance upgrade, 1 of 3, Cushcore. Not just any tyre insert, Cushcore, which does everything right. So rim protection is one thing, but Cushcore locks into the rim with this little rectangle section and gives you a mad amount of sidewall support. So that when you are pushing it around corners, you're not going to get your tyre creeping around because that's holding it up with this pretty firm rubber. Rim protection is another thing, so you can slam it into rocks and roots. You don't really have to worry about where you're landing. It also acts as a volume spacer for your tyre, so you can drop between half a PSI and a PSI out of your tyre for the same feel, but then increase traction because you've got a better contact patch with the ground. So Cushcore's the one. It's not porous either, like some inserts, so there's no bubbles, no little holes in it to soak your sealant up. So this is the one. It's a bit heavy, but if I can put it on a cross-country bike, then you can stomach it. Performance upgrade 2, having spent out on your expensive frame linkage and your expensive shock, you don't realise that your feet are actually stopping that shock from moving correctly when you get pedal kickback. So O-chain does away with that by having an elastomer spider. So as your linkage is extending and the wheel's moving back, the chainring's pulling and the crank isn't. So your feet aren't interfering with shock movement. And equally, your feet aren't being pulled back round. So your bike's a whole lot smoother. It also deadens noise to a degree. So it's an overall faster upgrade. There's a reason why all the World Cup teams are using it. And ask yourself, when you've spent out big time on a shock, what's 400 quid to make that shock actually work? And it's even better now with the O-Chain R, which is an adjustable version. So you can get between 4 degrees and 12 degrees of float just by twiddling this dial. So between different tracks on an enduro, you may have a track where you're constantly on and off the power, where 12 degrees of crank movement before the drivetrain engages is a bit annoying. So you'd ram it back, but equally a descent that's not got any pedaling and it's proper choppy, you're going to want as much movement as possible to get the most performance out of your frame. So then you dial it back onto 12. Bike number 3. And snob point number 3, wax your chain. So, sounds strange as an upgrade, but if you use wax rather than a normal lube for your chain, your chain is lubricated but dry because you've literally got a hard sort of, I guess like a candle wax on your chain in all of the bits, and it's like a wax bushing. Mountain Flow make the best that I've used in a bottle. So this is suspended in water and the water wicks off over, let's say, 4 hours, and you're left with dry wax on your chain. So it's smooth, you save some watts if you care, but the most important thing is it's really dry, so any dust or grit or sand doesn't stick to your drivetrain because there's nothing attracting it there. So everything lasts a bit longer, looks a bit cleaner, etc, etc. Like I say, this is my favourite. If you want to go extra snob, you can submerge your chain in literal molten wax. Smell that. This is actually Mountain Flow as well. This is actually one of their ski waxes. But there's lots of brands that make a submersible, meltable wax. So I've got this in a slow cooker, or you can put it in a pan over the stove. Dip your chain in it. It's a little bit annoying because your chain has to be really, really clean, but it's so worth it because you can get loads of miles out of an application. It does make everything last longer. So you've done 10 things to make your bike top notch, and this was 11, 12 and 13 to go that extra mile to get your bike really performancey. So tyre inserts, O-chain and fancy chain things. That is how you're going to make your bike another level. So if you've got a mate who thinks his bike is tip top, send him this and subscribe.